So one of the ways we find out about potential candidates is from suggestions made by members through the call committee. And then right now we put everybody on this list. And then we also find out from people saying, hey, I looked at the website, I see Trinity Camp Hill's on the list, could I be, in the mix for when you're ready to determine a candidate? Sure. The bishop works with myself and the other pastoral assistants. Every month we gather to look at all the vacancies throughout the synod and to see what work we have done to find potential matches for the congregations. Now, as we mentioned last week, right now, the number of vacant congregations that are currently active in call processes is not as large as it was perhaps a year ago. And we touched on why that might be, with one of the major reasons, that is, some of it is dealing with economics. We thought we were anticipating a couple of more retirements that have not occurred. And part of that is dealt with the fact of how the retirement plans have been doing the last couple of years. Some of you are probably very familiar with that. And so as a result, some pastors have delayed retirements. Others who are not close to retirement age have probably said, I'm in a good spot. I don't know if I want to anticipate the whole idea of relocation and starting a new call at this part. That's also going on as well. So that's why we think that there are fewer vacancies synod-wide. So that gives us, in one way, in one respect, it gives us more time to spend with those congregations who are in the process. But the 5 conferences I deal with right now, I would say 2.5 of them, don't have any openings right now for pastors. And so that gives us an opportunity to focus on those that are. So the ministry site profile is completed. The candidate does their profile. They're up online. We view them, and after deliberation, and I think one of the things I might suggest is that I would say, I might give you a call at some point saying, we're working our way down. I mean, I would stay in touch with Jeff as the chair to say, we're getting close, because there will be some weeks you don't hear from me, and that's not unusual. But our just constant regular checking is vital to do. Eventually, the bishop will identify a candidate, and I will bring the profile of that candidate to a meeting with the entire call committee. See, at the start, we're working with the call committee, this small group. And as the process moves along, the group gets larger and larger and larger until eventually a candidate is presented to the congregation for your vote. I should stop here. Any questions up to this point? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. It's kind of in parts. It may be putting the cart before the horse, but you just now began to touch on this process. I'm very curious, and I'm sure other members of this congregation are also, as to if we reverse this process and suppose, I'll give you an example. Suppose you have 18 applicants nationwide who respond to this online site profile for Trinity Lutheran Church. Can you kind of expound and walk us through the process at the synod level as to how you determine which one will be the one that visits Trinity and is interviewed by the council? How does that happen when you say, you mentioned it briefly, you're gonna look through that and the bishop will make a decision.
Right.
Can you expound a little bit on how that decision is made?
Sure. It starts very basically. The candidate's profile's here, yours is there. And I read the boxes that are common to both. I usually start with, this is the way I do it. The other systems may have a different method, but I look at the priorities and skill sets that the congregation has put down and compare that with because it's the exact same pages. and I see where they match up. And if they don't match up, that's pretty simple. If they do, then I'll go into some of the more narrative boxes to determine and try and both read the narratives that are there, but then try and think and read between the lines as to what each group is saying and see how that network intersects. And if it intersects on paper pretty well, and frankly, I've got to use my own intuition in some of this too. There are not a lot of variables, but there are, you know in your gut when you think you got something that's going to be exciting. And so there'll be, right there just at that very initial spot, there'll be a process of elimination. Because not every name that we get is going to be suitable. And that's the first step. Second step then is I'll share with my colleagues. Here's the 8 that really stand out from the group. I want you all to look at it and tell me what you think too. We share a lot. That's another thing. We share our opinions real freely when we do our meetings regarding mobility. And we always ask for the other's opinion. I'm not going to be doing this on my own. I'm going to be doing it with the collaboration of the pastoral staff in our office. And so I will then say, what do you all think? And the bishop kind of sits back and looks at this and watches our interaction, because sometimes we get loud and sometimes we make pointed comments, and he's, I don't want to say he's the referee, but he certainly is the moderator, and keeps us on task. So there's a real, the process is very intentional in that we look carefully before we even, and then ask for others' opinions. So that's part of our internal workings.
And the follow-up, or the part B to that question is, does Jeff Weaver or our call committee have anything to do with that process? The total number of applicants to ones that we actually see, or is this strictly done at the synod level?
This is pretty strictly done internally.
Okay. Just trying to get a picture of
Yeah.
how it works on that end. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If you had a rough percentage, what percentage of congregations select the very first candidate that is put before them?
Oh, let me think about that. It's, I think it's rather high. Always exceptions to any guess like that, because I'm working with one congregation right now that is interviewing their second candidate. But I'll tell you, the call committees that have done this preliminary work very well tend to be the ones that are able to make judgments pretty well on the first candidate. And that's where you had mentioned about Bishop Edmonston and Pastor Ludwig, being sample candidates for you. I think that's an excellent idea because you have 2 great resources here in your congregation that can really help you out. Because not only will that focus and fine-tune the questions that the call committee wants to ask, you'll then perhaps be able to anticipate some of the questions you're going to get as well. Because I would expect any candidate worth their salt to come with a page or 2 of their own questions. I mean, I would. And so that's utilizing the resources that you have for something like that. That's a benefit some congregations don't have. I know sometimes we've even in other congregations that don't have those resources, we could fill that role, or maybe a retired